Brutus. 13. Thus then we have traced the birth and origin of the orators of Greece, who were indeed very ancient, as I have before observed, if we compute by the Roman annals, but of a much later date if we reckon by their own, for the Athenian state had signalized itself by a variety of great exploits, both at home and abroad, a considerable time before she became enamored of the charms of eloquence. But this noble art was not common to Greece in general, but almost peculiar to Athens, for who has ever heard of an agive, a Corinthian or a Theban orator at the times we are speaking of, unless perhaps some merit of the kind may be allowed to Epimenides, I can't say that word, who was a man of uncommon erudition. But I have never read of a Lacedaemonian orator from the earliest period of time to the present. For Mencleus himself, though said by Homer to have possessed a sweet elocution, is likewise described as a man of few words. Brevity, indeed, upon some occasions is of real excellence, but it is very far from being compatible with the general character of eloquence. The art of speaking was likewise studied and admired beyond the limitations of Greece, and the extraordinary honors which were paid to oratory have perpetuated the names of many foreigners who had the happiness to excel in it. For no sooner had eloquence ventured to sail from the Piraeus, but she traversed all the isles and visited every part of Asia, till at last, infected with their manners, she lost all the purity and the healthy complexion of the Attic style, and indeed almost forgot her native language. The Asiatic orators, therefore, though not to be undervalued for the rapidity and the copious variety of their elocution, were certainly too loose and luxuriant. But the Rhodians were of a sounder constitution and more resembled the Athenians. So much, then, for the Greeks, for perhaps what I have already said of them is more than was necessary. Respecting the necessity of it, answered Brutus, there is no occasion to speak, but what you have said of them has entertained me so agreeably that instead of being longer, it has been much shorter than I could have wished. A very handsome compliment, said I, but it is time to begin with our countrymen, of whom it is difficult to give any further account than what we are able to conjecture from our annals. 14. For who can question the address and the capacity of Brutus, the illustrious founder of your family? That Brutus, who so readily discovered the meaning of the oracle which promised the supremacy to him who should first salute his mother. That Brutus, who under the appearance of stupidity concealed the most exalted understanding, who dethroned and banished a powerful monarch, the son of an illustrious sovereign, who settled the state which he had rescued from arbitrary power by the appointment of an annual magistracy, a regular system of laws, and a free and open course of justice, and who abrogated the authority of his colleague that he might banish from the city the smallest vestige of the regal name. Which events which could never have been produced without exerting the powers of persuasion. We are likewise informed that a few years after the expulsion of the kings, when the plebeians retired to the banks of the Ano, about 3 miles from the city, and had possessed themselves of what is called the Sacred Mount, Marcus Valerius, the dictator, appeased their fury by a public harangue, for which he was afterward rewarded with the highest posts of honor, and was the first Roman who was distinguished by the surname of Maximus. Nor can Lucius Valerius Potitus be supposed to have been destitute of the powers of utterance, who, after the odium which had been excited against the patricians by the tyrannical government of the Decemviri, reconciled the people to the Senate by his product laws and conciliatory speeches. We may likewise suppose that Appius Claudius was a man of some eloquence, since he dissuaded the Senate from consenting to a peace with King Paris, though they were much inclined to it. The same might be said of Caius Fabricius, who was dispatched by Pyrrhus to treat for the ransom of his captive fellow citizens, and of Tiberius Corinicanus, who appears by the memoirs of the Pontifical College to have been a person of the greatest genius, and likewise of Manus Curius, then a tribune of the people, who, when the Interrex Appius, the blind and able speaker, held the comitia contrary to law, refusing to admit any council of plebeian rank, prevailed upon the Senate to protest against the conduct of his antagonist, which, if we consider that the Manian law was not then in being, was a very bold attempt. Where does this keep going? We may also conclude that Marcus Pompilius was a man of abilities who, in the time of his consulship, when he was solemnizing a public sacrifice in the proper habit of his office, for he was also a flamen Carmentalus, hearing of the mutiny and insurrection of the people against the Senate, rushed immediately into the midst of the assembly, covered as he was with the sacerdotal robes, and quelled the sedition by his authority and the force of his elocution. I do not pretend to have historical evidence that the persons here mentioned were then reckoned orators, or that any sort of reward or encouragement was given to eloquence. I only infer what appears very probable. It is also recorded that Caius Flaminius, who, when tribune of the people, proposed the law for dividing the conquered territories of the Gauls and Piceni among the citizens, and who, after his promotion to the consulship, was slain near the lake Thrasminus, became very popular by historical talents. Quintus Maximus Veracocsus was likewise reckoned a good speaker by his contemporaries, as was also Quintus Metellus, who in the Second Punic War was joint counsel with Lucius Veturius Philo.